Welcome to this comparative video series of Omnipeek and Wireshark, where today we're going to cover visualizing packet data. So let's understand, why would anybody want to visualize packet data? Well, if you've had the pleasure of going through a trace file and knowing that it can contain thousands, even millions of packets, and trying to calculate those individually is quite a tedious process. Things that visualizing packet data can actually show us are simple things like bandwidth caps, where a user is complaining that the network's not fast enough, and we can actually see where it's being capped. Another possible scenario that we may be interested in is looking for a virus or malicious system on our network, where we are looking for either a port scan or node scan. So we'll start in Wireshark first, and we'll open up our file called issues, and it's currently a 95 meg file. First thing that you'll notice is if you open up a very large file and you're dealing with large data, it does take quite a bit of time to process. So we'll wait a couple of seconds for this within Wireshark. Now we're going to speed up the video so you don't have to sit around and wait too long. Once we have our trace file, the next thing we need to do, since we want to visualize data, is look at what that looks like. So we'll simply click on here and we'll go to our I/O graph. Once our I/O graph is there, we can see that it is set to all packets, bits per second, and you'll notice that it's 1.8 times 10 to the 7th. Now, hopefully you've done that calculation in your head. The next thing we're going to want to do is figure out if we've got a port scan or a node scan going on. So we'll start out with endpoints. Notice it's loading quickly. Once we click on here, it's not easily to visualize, but if you go through and you start scrolling down, you'll notice that the numbers start incrementing slowly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up, and there's not a lot of packet data going back and forth, indicating simply that there is a node scan taking place on the network. The next thing that we'd like to do is identify if there was a port scan that took place. Now, unfortunately, within Wireshark, there's not a very good way to visualize this data, so we'll go through and we'll try to see if we can tell. And this one is a lot more difficult to go ahead and tell that there's actually a port scan taking place. What we can see is each of the nodes that took place. We can see certain ports that look like they tried to be accessed at a certain time. This is the Wireshark side. Now we'll go over to the Omnipeek side. Now, let's look at that same file in Omnipeek. We'll open up our issues packet file. We'll notice it does take a little bit of time to load, but not quite as much time as the previous. And we're already seeing data. First thing that you should notice right away is our bandwidth cap that we noticed previously. We can easily see that it's about 18 megs, whereas before we had 1.8 times 10 to the 7th. The next view we're going to actually look at is the pure map. I picked the pure map view because based on what we indicated that we're looking for is a node scan and a port scan. This view is going to show us the best view. So you'll notice at the top, I still have my bandwidth cap that I can see up there. But what you'll start to notice if you look here is there are a lot of gray nodes. And the gray node indicates one-way conversation. This shows us if you sit there and you recognize the IP addresses go in somewhat of a sequential order, 192.168.1 and so forth, we'll see that it's one-way conversation. In fact, if you mouse over a particular node, you'll see that packets being sent is 0, but it's received 428 bytes. So a gray node is where traffic is basically received, but nothing is ever sent back. The other thing that you'll notice within the pure map is this dotted line, which indicates that there are a bunch of different protocols that are being actually leveraged for this particular node. So it tells us that either this node has a lot of ports open, or in this case, based on the fan that you can see here, is those ports were actually accessed multiple times by our scanning host. And if we want to identify that scanning scanning host, we actually see it right there. We have the IP address and the machine name of that particular host. Now, if we wanted to go about it from a nodes perspective, we can simply click on our nodes view. And if I sort by nodes, you'll actually see the incrementing values that I mentioned before, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'll notice that there's the 428 packets that are going there. And if we wanted to look at protocols as well, you'll start to see a list of protocols that take place, and you'll see 140 bytes each time. So in summary, we notice that Omnipeek loads files much faster. The graphs are more intuitive. Also, it is easier to identify a node scan and a port scan leveraging the pure map.